then of Western Europe, and of Africa and the Middle East, and the Far East, you'll find one central issue always coming out. Everywhere, Christianity is in recess. Everywhere, the idea of God's rule, of God's law, as promulgated by Christ and as maintained in the tradition of the Christian church, is in recess. And what God is saying to us, really, look, as a community of nations, you are bloodstained with guilt. You're bloodstained with guilt on account of your anti-life stance. You're bloodstained with guilt on account of your greed. You have deserted my altars, and therefore I'm leaving you to your own devices. And death is going to take over as long as you pursue this course. In other words, it's really an extension of what Our Lady said at Fatima, that what is happening is that God is allowing the greed and the avarice and the cruelty of man to run its course, since man as a community of nations are deserting him. And now added to that is the fact that most Catholics in the world today are confused. They're deeply confused, but what is right, what is wrong? Is there a just war going on in the Gulf? Is it right for us to deal with the guerrillas in Latin America the way we're doing? What should we do about South Africa, which is shortly going to become a different nation, and the conflicts in Southeast Asia? What are we to do about it all? Where's the directive? There's no clear clarion voice speaking to Catholics. So that is the difficulty. But the overall picture, I think, is explained by the fact that everywhere you can turn, name one country where you wouldn't find that Christianity and Catholicism is in recess. Recess in its faith, recess in its influence, recess in its way of life. And therefore God, you know, when a man drinks too much, Bernard, he doesn't send an angel to punish him. He lets him drink too much, and he ruins his organism. And if he takes drugs, we can take drugs for our diseases and etc. But if you exaggerate with drugs, you're going to kill yourself. God doesn't send an angel to say, hey, stop taking drugs. No, no, no. He allows the sanction of nature to work. There's a sanction of human nature in the community of nations working here. And I guess, as one Pope Pius X once said, what will happen, he said, is that men will be fighting and starting conflagrations between nations, and then brush fires will start out behind them. They'll start to put that out. No sooner will they have that one out than another one starts, and then a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, and finally the remnant will raise their hands to heaven and say, God, we need you. We need your help. And
so man is relying on himself, and it just isn't working.
It can't work. It can't work because God took over the world with the birth of a baby called Jesus. And that man's rule, the rule of God, through the God-man Jesus Christ, has been rejected concretely by the nations as a whole. They do not act for his sake. They do not act according to his law. They're not extending his rule, and therefore he is leaving them to their own devices. And therefore that's where we are today as regards explaining what is happening today around us. It's a bad time from that point of view.
Now something must be wrong with me.
These are dark times, there is no denying.
You all think I'm late. Well, I'm not late. And I'm going to stay right here and fight. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
You have two choices. Become a saint or go to hell.
Hold your ground! Hold your ground! This day we fight!
These are dark times, there is no denying.
These so-called Democrats and Republicans, they're not even American.
Hear me for the sake of your soul, which is in the gravest danger.
Drive the money changers from the temple!
Only Christ exists. Only Christ. And I am not worth 45 or even 5 euros. I am worth nothing.
By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West!
If you take a survey of the world, say take a survey of North America, Canada, the United States, and Latin America, and then of Western Europe, and of Africa and the Middle East, and the Far East, you'll find one central issue always coming out. Everywhere, Christianity is in recess. Everywhere, the idea of God's rule, of God's law, as promulgated by Christ and as maintained in the tradition of the Christian church, is in recess. And what God is saying to us, really, look, as a community of nations, you are bloodstained with guilt. You're bloodstained with guilt on account of your anti-life stance. You're bloodstained with guilt on account of your greed. You have deserted my altars, and therefore I'm leaving you to your own devices. And death is going to take over as long as you pursue this course. In other words, it's really an extension of what Our Lady said at Fatima, that what is happening is that God is allowing the greed and the avarice and the cruelty of man to run its course, since man as a community of nations are deserting him. And now added to that is the fact that most Catholics in the world today are confused. They're deeply confused, but what is right, what is wrong? Is there a just war going on in the Gulf? Is it right for us to deal with the guerrillas in Latin America the way we're doing? What should we do about South Africa, which is shortly going to become a different nation, and the conflicts in Southeast Asia? What are we to do about it all? Where's the directive? There's no clear clarion voice speaking to Catholics. So that is the difficulty. But the overall picture, I think, is explained by the fact that everywhere you can turn, name one country where you wouldn't find that Christianity and Catholicism is in recess. Recess in its faith, recess in its influence, recess in its way of life. And therefore God You know, when a man drinks too much, Bernard, he doesn't send an angel to punish him. He lets him drink too much, and he ruins his organism. And if he takes drugs, we can take drugs for our diseases and etc. But if you exaggerate with drugs, you're going to kill yourself. God doesn't send an angel to say, hey, stop taking drugs. No, no, no. He allows the sanction of nature to work. There's a sanction of human nature in the community of nations working here. And I guess, as one Pope Pius X once said, what will happen, he said, is the men will be fighting and starting conflagrations between nations, and then brush fires will start out behind them. They'll start to put that out. No sooner will they have that one out than another one starts, and then a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, and finally the remnant will raise their hands to heaven and say, God, we need you. We need your help. And
so man is relying on himself, and it just isn't working.
It can't work. It can't work because God took over the world with the birth of a baby called Jesus. And that man's rule, the rule of God, through the God-man Jesus Christ, has been rejected concretely by the nations as a whole. They do not act for his sake. They do not act according to his law. They're not extending his rule. And therefore, he is leaving them to their own devices. And therefore, that's where we are today as regards explaining what is happening today around us. It's a bad time from that point of view.
Now something must be wrong with me.
These are dark times, there is no denying.
You all think I'm late. Well, I'm not late. And I'm gonna stay right here and fight. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
You have two choices. Become a saint or go to hell.
Hold your ground! Hold your ground! This day we fight!
These are dark times, there is no denying.
These so-called Democrats and Republicans, they're not even American!
Hear me for the sake of your soul, which is in the gravest danger.
Drive the money changers from the temple!
Only Christ exists. Only Christ. And I am not worth 45 or even 5 euros. I am worth nothing.
By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand! Men of the West!
Hello. How's everybody doing? Welcome to Men with Chests, episode 31, I believe it is. Thanks for tuning in. Whoa, sorry. So, I'm Sam Bolton. I am happy to have you all here. Let me just check and make sure everything's working. Okay. If you are not hearing me or any of the other audio, please let me know. That way, I can adjust it. All right, thanks for tuning in. So, we should be having another host joining us soon. But until that time, just go over some of the stuff going on this week. But let me get started with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. And of course, a hearty Dennis Won't! So, we were going to have a guest tonight. It was going to be the admin for the Catholic Bitstream Dream Meme Machine, popular Facebook page. However, he apparently had to reschedule. So, it's just going to be me and another fella who will be joining us soon, talking about memes and current events. But nothing really major happened this week. You know, nothing earth-shaking has hit the news since we last spoke on last Monday. There was the small issue of the, let's see here. Oh, wait a minute, we got somebody. Anyway, I was going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, but one of our Facebook profile followers, Mr. Bates, would like to hop on to the stream and talk about his Christian girlfriend. So let me see if I can pull him up and bring him on. Hang on 1 second here. I've had some really popular memes this week. I had one that was a winged hussars parade, and it got a huge reaction. I think it was because it was pretty Polish girls dressed up as winged hussars. But it's really fascinating how popular Poland is right now, don't you think? Let's see here. We're going to invite people, copy the link, send it to Mr. Bates. See if he can get on here. Hope he doesn't mind me saying his last name. Alright. Close that. We'll see if he comes on. Boop. Alright. Oh, you can check out our Facebook page for all the dank memes, Men with Chests on Facebook. You'll see all of our latest updates as well for the show and any guests we might be having come on. And we'll also put news on there. And if you have a question, you can put it in the chat for the video here. Frank PV is saying, "How you doing, gentlemen?" And we're doing good, Frank. Thanks for asking. So while we wait for this fella to get on here, please, in the chat, if you are noticing any audio issues or anything like that, please let us know. Okay, I sent it to Mr. Bates. We'll see how he responds here. So I got into a pretty interesting exchange on Twitter this week with a philosopher named Chris Damian. His profile says, where does it say here? Proud father to a creative writing workshop. Contracts negotiator, accidental attorney, gay, Catholic. Hashtag YA respond, co-founder, and wearer of many hats. So on Twitter, he, I guess he wrote a paper, an academic paper, A Catholic Perspective on Homoerotic Desire, which, according to him, mines the Catholic tradition for a positive account of same-sex desire, both affirming church teaching and also looking forward. So he posted this on Twitter, and I saw old Steve Skocek retweet this and basically saying this is why we can't have nice things. And people were obviously responding negatively on his Twitter here. And he was mostly just saying, read the paper, you got to read the paper. And, well, Steve Skocek said in response to just read the paper before you comment, he says, the great thing about fundamentally flawed premises is that it saves you from a lot of wasted reading. Now, this is true. There's so much content to consume, only so much time in the day, and, well, there's only so much you can read, you know? And so I said the same thing basically as well. And let's see, Mr. Bates has not come on here. Anyway, my response to that, his response, my favorite people in school were I said, it's because your paper is trying to reconcile Catholic teaching and sodomy. It's objectively pill-pull from the foundation. People only have so much time in a day, and it's a waste of time to listen to a sophist argument for finding common ground between good and evil. That's the truth. I mean, there's a lot of content to consume, a lot of things to read, and a paper that's trying to make some space within the Catholic life, within Catholic thought for homoerotic desire, other than it's wrong and should be avoided. It's a vice, it's a sin, or it's a feeling that will lead you to a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance and will damn your soul to hell. Making some space within the Catholic life for that desire is not a paper I want to read. I don't care how well written it is and how many sources you cite. It's as if somebody was trying to make some space within the Catholic tradition for the desire to murder. The only space within that tradition that I want to see is discussion on how to get rid of that desire and to cleanse ourselves of these sinful desires and sinful natures and become holy, become saints. Because as Father Larry says in our intro mashup, become a saint or go to hell. You have two choices. So that's where we're coming from. Maybe it's a little bit black and white, but on certain issues, it pays to be a little black and white. Let me put my little screen here to protect. Okay. And so he responded, the paper explicitly affirms the Catholic position on sodomy, so that's good. And then he responds and retweets my response. This response is why I generally recommend reading it before making sweeping remarks. And so I responded to that. I said, I don't actually care. We can all see that this is a larger movement, rather his paper is part of a larger movement of trying to get the church to be openly fine with sodomy. And that's the entire point of soft-step sophistry. I don't know if you're a witting or unwitting participant, but a participant you are nonetheless. So, this guy, I don't know him, and I didn't read his paper. Full disclosure. Okay? But if you're going through school as a Catholic, you identify as gay. It means you've taken your desire to have anal sex with another man as a part of your identity. So you identify as gay, and you say you're Catholic at the same time. You're obviously swept up in this larger movement that's going on right now that's afflicting the church called modernism, right? And modernism is the synthesis of all heresies. This was taught to us by Pope St. Pius X, right? So this is a part of the larger movement of modernism, and within that larger movement, there's a smaller movement to get the church to be okay with sodomy, right? They're trying to change the language of the catechism about homosexual desire. There's plenty of people within the hierarchy who are practicing sodomites in secret and out in the open, right? And people like Father James Martin and some of the bishops and archbishops who have passed away and things that have come out about them, we know that this is a major issue. So when someone like Mr. Damien comes along and writes a paper trying to make some space within the church for these sorts of things, we have to reject it outright. We're not going to read his paper unless we're going to write some sort of like explicit academic response to it in a journal or something. We're not going to read his paper and think about it calmly. And I mean, maybe you want to, but it'll save you a lot more time if you just say, you're trying to reconcile the teaching of the church, the holy dogma of the church, and having some sort of nice feeling about homosexual desire. In fact, he says homoerotic desire. No, just, it's a waste of time, okay? Better things to do, more pressing issues to concern ourselves with. The West, Christendom is in a total moral collapse right now. We don't need to waste our time with things like this, okay? In fact, your paper would never be written if Christendom was not in a total moral collapse. So, I think there's enough said on that. Let's see here. Trying to get this guy to come on and talk to me. Oh, well. Well, maybe he's not going to come on. debates. So that's enough on that topic. I'm waiting. I should have a new co-host coming on here. He said he's trying to catch the bus. So I hope the audio is going through. Give me just a second. Let me check and see if I'm streaming my audio, because that would be horribly embarrassing if I wasn't. Yeah, if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, drop it in the chat on this video. Here we go. Can we address, this is from Frank, can we address the classical liberal surrender of every moral issue since the founding of the country? I'm guessing he means the United States. I guess we're about to start paying reparation to gay couples, I hear? Question mark. I haven't heard that, but if you want to drop a link in the chat, I'll take a look. Unless the Republicans grow a set, but since gay marriage is the law of the land, on what basis can it be opposed? Feel the guilt, Americans, and pay up. Huh. Okay, so can we address the classical liberal surrender? Well, I for a couple of years now, I've been a fundamentally illiberal political thinker. I think liberalism itself, classical liberalism itself, baked into the cake is all the moral collapse we're experiencing now. You can check out Chris Ferrara's talk, John Locke, Unlocking America. It's on YouTube. The Fatima Center put that up. You can read Mencius Moldbug and check out the NRX stuff. There was some other, I think Ed Fesser. Oh yeah, I broadcast that audio reading Ed Fesser's paper, Are We All Lockeans Now? And look into this. So America was founded as an Enlightenment project, and it was founded with Enlightenment philosophies baked into the cake. That's John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Hobbes, different philosophers like that. And those philosophies were actually a reaction to the classical philosophy of Christian civilization, right? So they're actually anti-Christian in their nature, okay? And these were the philosophies that influenced the founding fathers of the United States when they were writing our founding documents. And same goes for the French Revolution, the Revolutionary Republic of France, and to a lesser extent, the British society didn't undergo such a drastic revolution like France did, and to a lesser extent America did, but they're also an Enlightenment society based on Enlightenment philosophies. And these are anti-Christian philosophies, right? So it's based on egalitarianism. What's the war cry of the French Revolution? Liberté, égalité, fraternité. So these are the Enlightenment principles. It's based on egalitarianism, tearing down throne and altar, and making everybody equal on a level playing field, right? So you can see how these Enlightenment egalitarian philosophies bore out communism and Marxism and socialism, all these things that quote-unquote conservatives, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh types hate. But you can see how there was a natural sequential development from Enlightenment liberal philosophy to Marxism, because it tore down the traditional hierarchy of authority in the West and replaced it with egalitarian ideas of representative government and popular sovereignty and contract law as the basis of authority in our societies, rather than authority being derived from divinity, the divine right of kings, the social kingship of Christ, etc. And so when you do that, you're actually unpegging the authority in society from the traditional foundations in Christian divinity and placing it on something that has no real substance. And it can be interpreted differently by every subsequent generation, right? So if people start losing their faith in God as well, which is what has happened, we're post-Christian, then we're all just openly subjective. We're reinterpreting what reality means, what morality is. Every generation, every person, one for himself. And that all it does is lead to chaos where nobody can agree on anything, and it actually becomes a might is right situation. So that is why the classical liberals have surrendered on every moral issue since the founding of this country, because those moral issues are built on an understanding of God as the objective foundation of morality, and our society effectively no longer believes in God. And so the classical liberals have surrendered, right? Because who's to say two guys can't get married, right? They're two guys getting married is just as equal as a man and a woman getting married, and who are you to tell me that that's not true? You have this complex philosophical system going back to Christendom, Thomas Aquinas, natural law, that explains, the function and the form of marriage, marriage as a sacrament, marriage as something holy that God created to produce more children. But I don't buy into God. I don't buy into Christianity, and I totally reject that, you know? So that's why. And at the end of the day, the conservatives, the classical liberals, Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson to a lesser extent, though he's getting better, people like that, they represent a movement that is just progressivism driving the speed limit. That's what it said. Rather, the conservative movement and the progressive movement are heading in the same direction, just one is going a little bit slower and more cautiously. So, 10 years from now, National Review will be writing articles about why transsexuals are actually conservative, right? You already have that now with people like, I can't remember there's a conservative transsexual who just debated that other crazy liberal transsexual from Toronto on YouTube. This is supposed to be some sort of conservative owning the libs thing. Look, this transsexual agrees on that conservative ideas, therefore the libs are totally owned and wrong. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So that's why we have to reject liberalism altogether and get back to our Christian roots. And we're not going to affect this change on a mass scale in the West. I don't believe we are. But we have to affect this change in our hearts first, and then in our families and our homes, and then in our communities. And hopefully we can at least create pockets of people who have a respect for God's law and have rejected the Enlightenment anti-Christian philosophies. That's what we have to do. That's our job and our duty as Catholic men. With chests. So, let's see here. Trying to find... I hope that answered your question, Frank. And I hope you can hear me. Oh, that's right. I was trying to see if my audio was coming through. All right. Let's check it out. So how's your week been, folks? I hope it's been good. I really do. How do I hop on? I'd like to talk about my Christian girlfriend. I don't think you got my message. Let's see. So how's your week been, folks? Hey, look. I've got... audio coming through. Perfect. All right. So while we're waiting for my guest to come on, he said he should be on soon. He's actually in the same time zone as me, but he's on a different continent. Well, I guess it's not a different continent, but it is a different country. That's right. I was able to get my guest with a cool non-American accent who speaks good English, and he has a lot of interesting things to say. So can't wait till he comes on. I'll let him introduce himself. He should be a regular co-host as well, but he had to catch the bus, so he's just a regular guy like you and me. That's good. So last week we had Erick Ybarra on. Very bright guy, and it was an awesome interview, and I apologize that the audio was not good, but he actually a couple days later had a knockdown, drag-out debate with Jay Dyer on the Reason and Theology show, and it made a big splash, of course. But it was interesting. It was very interesting, and I listened to the debate, and I thought that it was interesting. Jay Dyer runs in a lot of different circles, and I've had some communication with Jay. He's been on the show before. We talked about the New World Order and the elites and all the crazy stuff that they're up to. Initially, he wanted to talk about orthodoxy, and I did not feel prepared or competent enough to effectively defend the Catholic faith in against Jay Dyer's polemical attacks, because he is a skilled polemicist, right? And he's been around for some years, and he runs in a lot of different circles. He talks about a lot of different topics. He writes books on esoteric Hollywood, and he was an MC for a secret space program conference with Catherine Austin Fitts and Joseph P. Farrell. And so he doesn't strictly talk about theology. He talks a lot. He's an autodidact, I guess you could say. He's pretty competent in a lot of different topics, but he's also very talented and well-read on the topic of theology. And I guess he used to be a Catholic as well, a more traditionalist Catholic. I've seen it said that he was a sedevacantist. I don't know if that's true or not, but he does have a kind of Orthodox ministry to sedevacantists right now. There's the Diamond Brothers on YouTube. They... apparently he's been peeling off certain folks from that group as well. So anyway, needless to say, I didn't feel competent to challenge him when he said he wanted to talk about orthodoxy. So really I've just been trying to listen to different Orthodox and Catholic conversations and understand the issues. And, you know, I don't want to be someone who's hostile and polemical. I'd rather have calm and reasoned discussions with people we disagree with. I think there's other platforms for people to do that. But anyway, Erick and Jay had a knockdown, drag-out debate, and I think Jay was coming to it as if it were like a blood sports style debate that they would have on YouTube. I guess it was about a year ago. Like on the Andy Worski show, they would do those political debates, and I think he was actually on one of them as well. So he's good at them. He's good at thinking well on his feet and being rhetorically nimble, and he's got a wide breadth of knowledge, and he can string a lot of different things together and create a narrative. And he sounds really intelligent because he is, and well-read because he is. And Erick is also very intelligent and very well-read, but his style was much more calm and formal, and he spoke slowly, and he was trying to nail Jay down on a certain point. It had to do with Canon 6 of a certain council. And it just, the debate itself wasn't very productive, I don't feel like. And what it mostly did was show to Catholics, people who are already sympathetic to the Catholic position, the character and the personality of Jay and of some of his followers, and kind of bred some distaste in their mouths about that. And I guess the Orthodox who watched thought that Erick was being manipulative or something. But from my interactions with Erick, he doesn't strike me as that type of guy. He seems like a pretty virtuous, upfront kind of guy. So anyway, it was interesting, and it got me into looking at some of the underlying things that were going on there. And what came out, there's another YouTuber named, he's got a French name, Horseshoer, something Luke Devon Horseshoer, I think his name is. But he brought up the idea that of the evidentialism versus presuppositionalism in apologetics. And he was making the point that good Catholic traditional apostolic church apologetics are evidentialist, whereas Protestant apologetics tend to be presuppositionalist, and how this is what was really going on, because Jay, having converted from Protestantism initially, is still using Protestant style rationalizations for his Orthodox beliefs in his debates with Catholicism. This is this particular YouTuber's take on things. I'm not saying that is true one way or the other, but I thought it was interesting. So it brought up this article about evidentialism versus presuppositionalism on Patheos by Libby Ann. So she says, I have noticed a worrying trend among some Christians. It is the turn away from evidentialist apologetics toward presuppositionalist apologetics. Evidentialism holds that belief should rest on evidence. Fair enough. Presuppositionalism holds that belief should rest on presuppositions. Evidentialist apologetics attempts to bring converts by revealing the evidence behind Christianity. Evidentialists say that scientific evidence actually supports young earth, creationism, that archaeology has proven the truth of the Bible, both New Testament and Old, and that evidence for Christ's historic existence is overwhelming. Oh, by the way, the Reason Theology guys are going to have Robert M. Price on their show soon, and that should be very fascinating because, like Jay, Robert M. Price is very well-read and a skilled rhetorician. He's also a great polemicist, and he is a passionate disbeliever in Christ. He thinks that Jesus Christ is a myth. Oh, hey, we have somebody on our call here. Is that Andres? Hello, hello. Are you muted? Hang on one second. Can you hear me? Hang on, okay? Hello? I'm not getting anything. I can't hear you, my friend. Hello? I guess he hung up. Well, that was my new co-host. I guess he's having some technical difficulties. Hopefully he can come back. Hang on, let me see if I can pull up something here real quick and change a setting. Maybe I can fix what's going on here. So, we were talking about evidentialism versus presuppositionalism. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Settings. Oh boy, this is great radio, isn't it? Okay. I'm not going to do this right now. Okay. So, that's okay. Evidentialism versus presupposition. So, evidentialist says that apologetics should be based on evidence. Presuppositionalist apologetics attempts to bring converts by arguing that only rational, coherent worldviews is that which begins by presupposing the divinity of the Bible, the existence of God, and the reality of Christ's sacrifice. In other words, presuppositionalists say that one must presuppose Christianity, and that trying to convince someone based on evidence is flawed. Interesting. So evidentialist apologetics is traditionally associated with evangelicalism and fundamentalism, while presuppositionalist apologetics is associated with more Reformed traditions. Interesting distinction, okay? This actually makes a lot of sense given that Arminianism emphasizes free will while Calvinism emphasizes predestination. It also makes sense given that Cornelius Van Til and Francis Schaeffer, both Reformed, are the major luminaries who developed the presuppositionalist apologetics. More and more these days, this approach is spreading beyond Reformed circles. Let's see here. Looks like he is having a little problem. Let me send my email to him real quick. There we go. So more and more these days, this approach is spreading beyond Reformed circles and into evangelicalism and fundamentalism in general. So the presuppositionalist apologetics is spreading just beyond Reformed circles. So evidentialist apologetics is what this person was raised on. This is actually, it's kind of interesting. It kind of makes sense that a presuppositionalist apologetic would be more attractive to a Protestant, because you have to presuppose that the Bible is divinely inspired for the whole thing to work, right? And when you look for evidence of the claims of sola scriptura, you realize that the Bible didn't come into existence until centuries after the apostles died, and that for centuries and centuries, Christianity spread all over the old world and turned the Roman Empire on its head as a social movement, and people were dying as martyrs and becoming great saints and exercising amazing and inspiring piety, all without a canon of Scripture. And then along came a church council, the Council of Carthage and the Councils of Carthage and Rome in the 300s, that defined a canon of Scripture, that, and these were books that the church said could be read in Mass. And then we had a Bible. And then nobody had the idea of anything like sola scriptura until Martin Luther came along in the 1500s. So when you start to think about the evidence, the historical evidence for a doctrine like sola scriptura, it falls apart. But if you presuppose it and then make the Christian story and the Christian narrative fit into a sola scriptura framework, then you can make all kinds of apologetic arguments. So I can see why someone who's a Protestant might be favored toward a presuppositionalist apologetic. So the Bible actually, let's see here. The goal of evidentialist apologetics is to convince others of the truth of Christianity by using evidence, as we already said. It assumes that anyone who honestly looks at the facts will arrive at the truth of Christianity, and that the facts support the truth of Christianity. So this is like your Josh McDowell, evidence that demands a verdict, evidentialist apologetics, evidence that demands a verdict. In the last few years, my parents, so she's basically saying that more and more Protestant sects have been moving toward presuppositionalism. So argues that the evidence we experience in the world is simply facts and pieces of data that must be interpreted through an interpretive framework or worldview, and that the only way to consistently interpret these facts is through the Christian worldview. In other words, a person looking at facts and evidence will not necessarily be led to Christ. Rather, one must start by assuming the truth of the Bible in order to find Christ, right? Presuppose the truth of the Bible in order to find Christ. You can see the influence of Calvinism here. Presuppositionalist apologetics, then, focuses on pointing out inconsistencies of other worldviews and arguing that Christianity is the only coherent worldview, the only way to explain the existence of reason and logic. In fact, presuppositionalism literally goes so far as to argue that evidence-based apologetics, as opposed to apologetics based on contrasting worldviews, is contra-biblical. Okay, yes, James White does ring a bell. That is very true. James White is the premier anti-Catholic Calvinist apologist, I guess you could call him. By the way, there's a a YouTube channel called How to Be Christian that does these amazing, just logic-rich YouTube videos, and they take on James White a lot and a lot of his claims, and they just take him apart. You should definitely check them out. He's awesome. So, thank you, Frank, for that chat. If anybody else has a chat, throw it in the chat box. Okay. Going on. This is probably getting boring. So, basically, the French YouTuber I was talking about made the point that because Jay Dyer comes from a Baptist background, that he was using a presuppositionalist apologetic against the Catholic Church. And he was presupposing the idea that the Orthodox Church was the true church. And he was taking apart every other worldview, in this case being the Catholic Church, using this presuppositionalist apologetic. But the danger of it is you can presuppose anything and cram the evidence into a worldview and make it prove whatever you want. So, is that Andres? Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Thanks for coming on the stream. How are you tonight? Good, good. So, what kind of microphone are you using? Okay. Yeah, it's just a little bit low. Let me see if there's any way to turn it up. 1 second. Talk a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. All right, Andres, please introduce yourself and tell the folks about who you are and where you come from and what you're doing here on the stream. And try not to move around too much, just making a little noise. It's okay. I can see. Go ahead.
So, what I'm doing here on the stream is, well, you put up the call, and I was one of the few that answered, I guess. And what can I say about myself to introduce myself? I used to be an atheist most of my life. Grew up Novus Ordo Catholic, and kind of left the faith after having struggled with it. Not a lot of reverence, the Eucharist, things like that. So that a lot of Catholicism didn't make sense. So after being an atheist for 10 years, 15 years, I started searching, and I did a lot of stupid stuff to come back home. But finally I did November last year, and I've been attending SSPX parish here in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Oh, so you're an SSPX schismatic, are you?
Exactly.
Cool. Hey, Andres, can you try to make sure the camera is capturing your face? That'd be great. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's great. So you're in Mexico. What part of Mexico are you in? That's right. You said that. Guadalajara. Okay. Have you lived there your whole life? I have heard of it. Yeah. Is that a famous vacation spot? Ah, okay. I gotcha. Perfect. All right. Well, wow, and you got a bachelor's in psychology? Okay, great. So you can help me understand my subconscious motivations for wanting to podcast a traditional Catholic show. Yeah, good deal. Well, let's see. Did you happen to see, Andres, I posted a video from, do you know Tim Pool, the YouTube commentator? He talks about politics.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I don't follow his channel yet, but I saw one of your previous podcasts with John Duchamp. Maybe I haven't put two minutes.
Yeah, Charles de Beauchamp. Yeah, he's a French royalist who helps me post dank memes on the Facebook page. He's a great guy. So. Okay. Well, I posted a video from Tim Pool recently, and he was basically saying that he believes that we're heading toward a civil war in the United States because of the divisive politics going on. Abortion being one, the immigration debate being another one. There's a huge cultural rift between right and left in the United States, and he notices and is observing the left wing activists becoming more and more violent, and then there's right wing activists becoming violent, and then we even had the shooting in El Paso, Texas, at a Walmart recently, if you remember that, and then just hours later, there was a shooting in Dayton, Ohio, and he was a left-wing Antifa kind of guy, and he may have actually been doing that in response to the shooting in El Paso. So, a lot of people there's a lot of people who think a civil war is coming to this country, but we only have one kind of civil war experience, the one that happened here in the 1800s, and it was actually a very unique civil war. Most civil wars don't happen that way. And in fact, there was one in your country, I believe, in the early 1900s, right? Mm-hmm. Wow. Sorry, bro. Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Who went against or denounced these laws were immediately jailed. And it got to a point that I don't know if you know this, but the narrator in the regime for Lincoln Guadalupe,
Mm-hmm.
the portrait that
The Tilma.
the Tilma, it's placed in a church in Mexico. There was actually a terrorist attempt against that Tilma. One of a bunch of military personnel disguised themselves as workers, perhaps from the railroad, or maybe one of the haciendas, and they went into this place, and one of them, of the workers, that seemed like a factory guy, grabbed a bunch of flowers, placed them under the portrait of Religious Guadalupe, and went back. And a few seconds later, what he had placed there exploded. He placed a bar of dynamite under a lady's feet.
Gosh.
A miracle happened. Yeah, the whole church's windows exploded, but the glass in front of Our Lady did not explode. And the cross in front of it was completely bent out of shape, and he took the blast for her. So there you have Jesus the Son taking the glass and the children were completely preserved and protected.
Gosh, that's a wild story. Huh. Well,
To wrap that up, you can see the government protected this guy. They wanted to shoot him in the spot, or the Mexicans do themselves upon him. But the president sent a letter, or called by the phone to the mayor to protect him and to give him in custody. And he did that, and it was never heard what happened to him. So
huh.
what is gathered is that he asked him to do it. The president asked him to take the barrel of dynamite to Our Lady's feet.
That's insane. Yeah, you would think like the Freemasons. Now, the revolution was largely funded and supported by Freemasonry, correct? Yeah.
Looking back at history, perhaps you won't find official documents, but you can read very clearly between the lines where the support came from, who was the leading political party that emerged.
It's so interesting because the Freemasons allegedly claim that they believe in God, but they think that like many roads lead to God, and you can, be Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim or whatever, and then you can still be a Freemason and in good standing. But if that were true, if you were really a Freemason and you believe that, why would you explicitly attack a specific religion's sacred treasure and relic like that? It doesn't. It's clearly, to me, something like that shows that they're actually hostile to the Catholic faith. And why do you think that is?
I actually had a talk with a bit of an erudite that goes to Paris, and he discussed with me at length kind of like the difference between the rites, the Masonic rites. And apparently there's one that's radically anti-Catholic. It's explicitly anti-Catholic. It encourages its members to do acts that would hurt the Catholic faith,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps to infiltrate it or to denigrate it publicly. Another rite, I don't really know the Scottish ability or whatever, but I don't know religiously. And the other one seeks only to republicanize or liberate society in such a way that people take no heed to the policies.
Yeah.
So each of them, one is more pernicious than the other. The other one is more violent or direct in its approach. And actually, one of the civil wars Mexico had was between these two factions because they couldn't decide which way to take.
Oh, really?
Yes, and you can see that the papers, the conservatives, which were the more Republican ones that didn't want to hurt the so much,
Mm-hmm.
versus the liberals, who were rather than the liberals.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really see on history, especially in Mexico, if you go back and you go to primary sources, you can see the diaries, the papers, the press they were printing, and they have the Freemasonic lodge symbol, the compass.
Yeah, square and compass. Yeah.
So everything is right in the open. The thing is that they've done such a good job to fool the Mexican people and also erase the Cristero wars out of the history books.
Ah, the Christeros. Yes.
Yes. They've erased every bit of past firsthand about the Catholic Church being good to our country, founding universities, doing hospital work, essentially erected every bit of good human institution that our country has was founded by the Catholic, either the Franciscan orders, Jesuit orders back in the day,
Okay. Hey, Andres, we have a question from the chat. They say that your volume is low. If there's any way to get your volume up, that'd be great. Of course, I will Yeah, it's tricky. We'll get it figured out. This is the first time having him on, so we'll definitely do some troubleshooting for the next time. But I'll re-upload the audio for this show to the RSS feed, and you'll be able to hear him a lot better on that. But Andres is basically going over the history of Mexico and the civil wars they've had, and how Freemasons have attacked the Catholic Church. So yeah. But the question was, how closely linked is Masonry to Protestantism? Do you have any thoughts on that? Okay. And maybe just try speaking a little bit louder to just see if that helps.
If you see the Christero work, something interesting happened. The government tried to start Mexican Orthodox Church or Mexican Catholic Church. And what they did was they grabbed a priest who was friendly to the Freemasons or had affiliation to them, we don't know. And they had a cardinal bishop who was an old Catholic and had like ties to the Anglican Church. Give them the blessing to be a bishop. So he came back to the country as a bishop, and the government had all the government workers had to go to church with him. They couldn't go to any other Catholic church, and they used him essentially to create a breakaway church in Mexico. It didn't work, of course, because the Civil War erupted a little bit later. But you also have one of the little funny things, or very stupid things. I think Mexico has one of the few countries that has one of its members is late and declared himself pope, and that happened to this time. He declared somebody pope. That didn't last long, of course, but this priest that became a bishop and became the patriarch of Mexico had strong ties to the Anglican Church, especially. The Anglican Church wanted Mexico to create this church so it could finally break free of Catholicism.
Oh wow.
For the church. And he died on the arms of an Anglican priest. And even though the official story of the Catholic Church is that he repented and went back into the church, a lot of the I call it maybe strong rumors is that he died on the arms of this Anglican priest, and he never turned back. So, and also Protestants give a lot of support to this movement, and also to this Mason government.
Yeah. I had some thoughts on that question as well, Andres. What people don't understand a lot of times is that the last 500 years of the church has been a kind of crisis, and that's because of the Protestant Reformation. So when people talk about the crisis that we're in now, the church crisis of the 20th century, that's true. This is a really severe crisis we're going through, the crisis of modernism, but it's not disconnected from the 500-year crisis of the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant rebellion, really, and all the problems that caused. And the church has been battling Freemasons in one form or another for centuries. In fact, I believe it was Pope Leo XIII wrote more encyclicals denouncing the Freemasonic order than any other pope had produced on any single order ever before or since. So it's really serious. And of course, we all know that if you're a Catholic, you cannot also be a Freemason. It's an automatic self-excommunication. So as far as their link to Protestantism, again, use the term strong rumors. I have also heard strong rumors that, in fact, some of the symbolism that the Lutherans used when Martin Luther was alive showed symbolism similar to the Order of the Rosicrucians or the Order of the Rosy Cross. And actually, the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons are very closely linked, and they have a very similar worldview. And that worldview is actually the worldview of Gnosticism, if you really want to boil it down to it. And this is the same heresy that Paul was fighting in the New Testament. So really, this is a struggle that's been going on for 2,000 years. And really, what's going on is Gnosticism tells you that you can become God. You can become like God. And this is about eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So this is the conflict that goes back to the garden. This is the conflict between heaven and hell. This is what this really, truly is. Yes, yes. Yes. And that's the core lie of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. And I don't mean to say that if you're a Protestant that you are buying into this lie necessarily. And Protestant sects are all different. You know, they don't all believe the same thing. But certain Protestant...
Like Protestantism, in a way, kind of heralds or kind of points to this modernist crisis because, like you see, in Protestantism, you have free interpretation of the scripture.
Yeah.
You don't have proper exegesis. So essentially, any preconception you have about how the faith should be lived, you just go to the Bible and look for whatever passages you want. That's why there's like 40,000 denominations of Protestantism.
Right.
And this same heresy found its way to the church. Of course, not as Protestantism, but as modernism. So we really see this subjectivism, poison, creeping into the church in the early 1900s.
Yes. Yes. So, all that to say, the struggle against Freemasonry is an outgrowth of the struggle against Protestantism, because if the Protestant rebellion hadn't happened on the continent of Europe, then Freemasonry would not have been able to get as powerful as it did. If the church had remained with institutional power in nations like England and Germany, I believe it would have been able to keep more of a check on the growth of Freemasonry. But because Protestantism grew like it did, it destroyed that check against the Freemasonic order, and they were able to grow and flourish and basically scheme and enact revolutions. And that includes the French Revolution, the American Revolution, probably the Glorious Revolution in England with Thomas Cromwell. I'd have to look into it, but I would not be surprised. And, of course, the revolutions in Mexico we've been talking about.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I also have found a very interesting link between Marian apparitions and trying to stop Freemasonry. If you see, there was a very strong Marian apparition 100 years before the French Revolution. And it told the kings to consecrate the country to her heart. And they didn't. On 100 days, I think exactly, the country fell into revolt, and the revolution started there.
Was that? Do you remember which apparition that was?
Well, the French Revolution was in the 1700s, so it must have been the one that happened in the 1600s.
Okay.
It happened in France. The name escapes me. But yeah, there was a prophecy that they should consecrate the country to her, and they did. The revolution happened. So there's a bit of a link between Fatima and that apparition. Yeah,
it's interesting that the similar circumstance with Fatima, where she requests specifically the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart for the conversion of Russia, and it wasn't done. I mean, it was like half-heartedly done, consecrating the whole world to her Immaculate Heart. So yeah, it's interesting. And also, you folks out there who have been following TNT, Taylor Marshall, and looking into that information, he talks about the Alta Vendita Italian Freemasons and the letter that was actually published by the Vatican, where they were talking about basically infiltrating the church and causing a social revolution and breakdown through the church. Because we're talking about all these times in history when the Freemasonic forces openly opposed the church with violence and military force, and how it didn't work, and it actually inspired more piety and more zealotry for the Catholic faith among the faithful, because, as Tertullian said, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, right? So they adopted a different strategy in the 20th century, and this may sound conspiratorial, but if you look at the information that Taylor Marshall published in his book, and it's been published in other places before that as well, they really did infiltrate the church and start polluting it with modernist and Freemasonic ideas. So
right now, it's hard to know if one of the priests giving you the sacraments is an infiltrated Masonic guy or tied with the Masons, or if he just had the misfortune of being poorly catechized and not know the true faith. So we live in dire times in that respect.
That's true. Oh, we have another question from Frank here. He says, is the Masonic symbol of Lady Liberty, that's the Statue of Liberty, an act of mockery against Our Lady, Our Lady Mary, of course? And what do we think of the Statue of Liberty, which was a Masonic gift? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't know, but Father Hess respond to that question. Father Hess was asked that precise question at some point. Like, isn't liberty good? Is liberty a virtue or value?
Mm-hmm.
Liberty is to take yourself liberties against God. Freedom, true freedom, is being for God.
That's right.
And he gave a very, very good answer saying, as long as that, as the wench sitting at the bay is the Statue of Liberty and not the Statue of Freedom, have nothing to do with it.
Interesting. I like that. I know the Statue of Liberty was definitely a Freemasonic gift. The Freemasonic founding fathers of the United States of America were closely tied to the Freemasonic revolutionaries in France. This is not a secret. All you have to do is go back and look at the ties that they have. It's all there. It's not some kind of conspiracy theory. And that gift of Lady Liberty, this is a repaganization of the Christian West, right? I remember back in my anti-Catholic days when I was a Protestant, there was a lot of people in those circles that would look at symbols like the Statue of Liberty and try to link them back to old ancient pagan gods and goddesses. And I think there's something to that. I mean, you see the way that that Washington D.C. and that neoclassical architecture resembles the architecture of Greece and Rome, and you can also see how our society is becoming more and more pagan the more and more it adopts Freemasonic post-Enlightenment ideas. So I really do think that there's something to there being a repaganization and the Statue of Liberty being possibly Columbia, the goddess Columbia or Diana.
Or even going back to Babylon. I think all these mystery schools and kind of like the traditions, in a way, try to link themselves back to kind of Babylonian or Greek milieu. Like they use their symbolism, and they deal with kind of like the mystery schools, like the Greek and the Dionysus. So a lot of, for a time, I studied those things. I thought them sophisticated at the time. I was a real moron.
Yeah. Don't feel bad. We all feel that way nowadays.
Yeah, we're not alone. But if you look at the symbolism of the Statue of Liberty, the symbol of a woman holding fire and kind of like heralding it in a way, it's definitely a pagan symbol from way back. And to take heed a bit with the Enlightenment ideas, which might be good to touch upon them, a lot of atheists think like the Enlightenment was very atheistic in its nature, because Voltaire or Victor Hugo, all of these French guys thought of themselves so. But if you look back at their biographies, for example, Victor Hugo, at some point disillusioned with the French Revolution, went to an island and practiced spiritism.
Oh, wow.
Conjure up demons and talk with them. And that's something not a lot of people know. So a lot of these people had like spiritist agendas that are openly anti-Christian. So if you look at their biography, especially Victor Hugo, what he did at the end of his life, he was deeply satanic.
It's so sad, too, because you have all these artists in literature and music and cinema who are so talented, and they create such enjoyable art that we all grow up with and love. And then you start looking into their backgrounds, and you realize that so many of them are into Satanism and the occult and all these depraved things. It's disheartening. It really is. It's hard to... it's just in the air. It's hard to escape that stuff now, unless you go full Benedict option and like live out in the woods or something. But yeah, it's just sad. What was I going to say about the Statue of Liberty? Oh, he was asking if we thought it was a mockery of Our Lady. I think that's an interesting idea. I actually wrote before I became Catholic, and when I was finishing my master's degree at a school here in Nashville, I wrote my final paper on the Virgin Mary. I was obviously becoming more Catholic, but you hear a lot of people online now, Robert M. Price being on the Reason and Theology show, talking about how Jesus Christ was just a myth, and the way that we can prove this is by looking at the ancient pagan gods and the different symbols that they used and how they share those in common with Jesus Christ. And the common response to that is, that's just ridiculous. You're making this up. You're drawing too many tenuous connections. And maybe that's true. But the actual response by the church fathers, at least one of them that I know of, is that I would take a more positive interpretation. Look at it this way. The incarnation of God in the man Jesus Christ was such a momentous event, and his life and his crucifixion was such a huge momentous event in history, and that his crucifixion and sacrifice actually transcends space and time and permeates all of existence. It's the central core focus of history, that it, in a sense, like sends out ripples throughout time and space in both directions. And I think there's such a desire for God in the human heart, intrinsic to the human heart. People pick up on it and express it in their art and in their mythology. And this is why we see similarities in ancient myths. And I think that there's something to that. This is sort of I think I got this idea from C.S. Lewis, actually. But I think the same is true with Mary. There's a desire in the human heart to have a mother, a heavenly mother. And that's why we see so many divine mother figures in the ancient cultures prior to Christianity, because there is that desire. And the fulfillment of that desire is the true heavenly mother in the Virgin Mary. So in that sense, yes. Yes. So I would say that those ancient pagan mother goddesses, like the Statue of Liberty might be representing, was a sort of expression of the human desire for the true heavenly mother. But as far as whether the founding fathers erected it as a mockery of Our Lady, I have no idea, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I also heard church fathers, early church fathers, refer to this same phenomenon and address it in that the devil, being who he was and the charge he had in heaven before his fall, knew of the story of what was going to unfold and did his best to deceive the pagan cultures into twisting the story of Calvary or twisting the story of the Son of God into many ways to make either cultures a warrior culture, a violent culture, one that worships sex. All of these human endeavors that end up taking the place of God in our hearts.
I agree with that, yeah. And, a lot of time atheists will mock that idea like it's so stupid. Oh, you think the devil just invented all of these things and lied to the ancient pagan cultures to deceive Christians? That's such an absurd idea. But it's really not if you accept that what the church teaches about the devil and that he exists. He's an angel. He has an extremely powerful intellect and ability to know things way beyond even our ability to comprehend as humans. And he knows our hearts better than we do, right? And so we were just talking about this desire that humans have for the full divine family, for Jesus Christ, for Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, for their divine mother. He knows that desire. He knew it before the culmination of Christ. He may not have known it fully, but he was able to play to that and twist it and tempt us with those desires and turning what God intended for good into evil, because he's the devil. He's a bad dude. That's what he's about.
One of the Catholic commentaries on the fall of Satan is that he was a light bearer. He was to bring, or his charge was to bring the gospel or the fullness of the faith to the world. And one of the reasons he denied that charge was because he saw the future, or God revealed it to him, and he saw Mary becoming greater than he was, and essentially taking his place. So in a sense, Mary became the queen of heaven, and he couldn't bear a human being given such status or humbling himself to such a degree that God would exalt him to such a degree.
Right.
So, he rebelled against him.
Yeah, I think I've heard Father Ripperger, Chad Ripperger. Are you familiar with him?
Yes, I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, the Chad Father. Yeah, exactly. His talk about angels and angelology, that was huge for me when I was coming into the church 4 or 5 years ago. I would listen to him, and he talked about, I remember him talking about that was the thing that really galled Satan more than anything, was to see that he would have to bend the knee to a woman, no less, a young virginal woman, So that was really interesting, fascinating stuff. So.
Documents those very traditionalist priests were putting stuff on the internet. I certainly wouldn't have converted if I didn't have access.
Exactly.
The homilies, the lectures, and all their content they're putting out, especially podcasts like this. They kind of gave me the last push. Seeing lay people discussing this, I was taking aback. And I said, well, I need to delve more into this. There's people actually putting kind of trying to pull themselves by their bootstraps, doing what the church has been doing.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we have to do this right now. I would love to be able to live as a lay person in the care of a good, holy, virtuous priest and not worry about what the church is up to and how they're leading the flock. My parish priest is actually a really good traditional conservative guy, so I don't mean to speak ill of him. But in general, we have a big problem in the church right now, and where a huge portion of the hierarchy is unwilling to lead like they're supposed to. And so because of that, we're in an abnormal circumstance where the lay people, and especially lay Catholic men, have to stand up and take responsibility for their faith and teach themselves and then help each other teach themselves. So.
If I can do a bit of a shameless plug, I don't know if it would be a shameless plug, but Cardinal Burke, I think, is leading from August 15th of the Assumption all the way to the Battle of Lepanto. He wants us all to pray the Rosary.
Yes.
To free our governments from, he didn't put it this way, from essentially from the Masonic guild competing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate. I wish, I yearn for a time when the church leadership is able to speak clearly and directly about the truth instead of having to couch things in such just...
Bowing down to human respect and thinking, what will people think about?
Yeah.
You cannot dilute the church teaching and hope people will receive it well.
I know it. If you go back and read church documents from just 100 years ago, it's amazing how clear and direct it is. It's like you cannot mistake what they were trying to say. Whereas now things are very vague and left open for interpretation, and it's called weaponized ambiguity in Archbishop Vigano's letters about Pope Francis. He uses that term. It's explicitly written that way so bad actors in the church hierarchy can misinterpret them and teach people the wrong thing and lead people the wrong way and have some sort of cover by misinterpreting it. So it's
letting people do exegesis instead of exegesis, not by their own fault, but by their own misguided intentions. I read something that's ambiguous, and perhaps if a response will take too much time, I just interpret it as best as I can, and package Catholic doctrine as something that's clearly not, but not through my own fault.
Yeah. Exactly. So, can we focus in for a few minutes and talk about the Christeros? Because I think they're really interesting, and I'm actually now. Full disclosure, you're SSPX. I'm like half-time Novus Ordo, half-time traditional Latin Mass. But I've got a foot in both worlds right now. I'm trying to have an effect in a Novus Ordo parish, and I'm actually going to join the Knights of Columbus soon. And hopefully, because I'm more traditionally minded, but I want to be able to have that impact on the church, because I don't, I'm not someone who buys into the idea that they're like outside the church. Anyway.
And just to add something a little bit to that, it's I'm at SSPX right now, but I'm moving back to my hometown here soon, and there's no traditional mass in the whole state. So what I'm gonna do for mass, well, I'm gonna have to attend the Novus Ordo parish. So,
yeah.
So we grab onto what we have and try to make the most of it, and try to change others into having more reverence, more respect. So that's all we can do.
Yeah. So the reason why I bring up the Knights of Columbus is that one of the things that I found out about them was just 100 years ago during the Mexican Civil War, they were funding the Christeros against the Freemasons. They were sending money. These are American Catholics sending money to actual Catholic resistance fighters, like fighting people with guns. Can you imagine that? Like American Knights of Columbus Catholics, the Larry the Boomer Catholic doing that nowadays. I can't,
They'd sooner send money to ISIS, I think.
Well, yeah, shekels for Zion goes to ISIS. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, when the Christero movement started, I need to point this out. It wasn't hierarchical. So if these words bring a little bit of conflict to you, the hierarchy it couldn't issue any official call to arms, of course. But the lay people organized themselves, and 25,000 people strong made a resistance movement that made our government take pause, take heed, and essentially not enforce the law they were trying to enforce. And the Knights of Columbus were a huge aid, and also I think the Knights of Malta, for a brief moment, gave some aid to Mexico. So you have these foreign organisms or institutions that are linked to the church, helping the freedom fighters. And I think it was the Catholic youth movement that actually, where the Christero war began, so the young people were seceded and took up weapons and arms and declared, I want to remember their motto correctly.
Is that
My God and my right. And that was their motto. And they started the National Guard. And through that movement, they started defending themselves from the government.
Mm-hmm.
And to mention an interesting story of a conversion, I don't remember the name of the general, but the Christero movement was very disorganized at the beginning. So they hired a Mexican man who studied at West Point Academy, and he wasn't a believer. He was a bit of a Christian, but very relaxed. He wasn't a Catholic, a fervent one. They were paying him to be a general, but by seeing all of this martyrdom, he essentially converted and was leading as a lay devoted person this resistance. So it was very disorganized. They had to pay it for a general that wasn't even of their own, let's say, belief system. But essentially, they didn't pull any punches, and they defended the faith here in Mexico. If it wasn't for them, you'd have a socialist country south of the border that had killed all of the Catholics. So thank God for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So they what was their motto again? My God and my right. And how do you say that in Spanish? Okay. And I assume they were using the Spanish version.
Of course.
Yeah. I was just curious. So interesting. Yeah, and we have different stories similar to that where you had just common lay people and young folks who loved the faith banding together and resisting Masonic overthrow and Masonic suppression of the church. And so a lot of times this has happened in history when the hierarchy fails for whatever reason, lay people have to take up arms and either spiritually or physically and defend the faith. So this...
The hierarchy is for, I don't want to sound arrogant, but the hierarchy is here to serve the lay people. And when they start failing, it's up to the lay people to put them back on track. Because of course you're our leaders, but just as Christ is in the table to serve, our hierarchy is there to serve us, and they should do a good job of it. Sadly, when they fail, it's up to the lay people to take up arms or defend themselves. Like they said, if things get hard in the U.S., the Christero motto was, they're giving heaven for free. You get to be a martyr. Okay, so glory awaits you. And I saw today the pictures of the Polish kid who stood.
Ah, yes. I wonder if I can pull that up. Go ahead and keep talking. I'm going to see if I can bring it up on screen.
I saw that brave 15-year-old and reminded me of essentially a story of Mexican Christeros. There was a 14-year-old kid in Mexico who served the resistance movement, and he has a very gruesome martyrdom story. He was essentially captured by the military. He was taken to a vacant church because by then they had vacated the churches, defiled them, completely destroyed whatever was inside them, and they were using them as either military headquarters or torture fields. And they took his kid and they beat him up and started torturing him. And he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't denounce Christ. He wouldn't deny him. And they cut the soles of his feet. It's a quite gruesome story and made him walk to his grave. But there's a bunch of stories of that in Mexico, and people really buckled up and fought to the end.
Wow, that's amazing. So you said the kid in Poland was 15?
He was 15, yes. He was. I read he was 15. He held up a crucifix and attached to it was a rosary. And very gently, he stood up in front of them, and the police started moving him. And they finally asked him, "Why are you here?" While they were pushing him, he said, "I come here to defend Poland from those who I don't know, kind of seek to pollute it or defile it or something." And essentially, the police were having none of it, so they him like having to push him all the way. So they finally carried him, and very humbly, he was taken by them and placed aside or moved aside or I don't know, held for how much time.
Yeah, this is something that American Catholics need to understand and get through their skull. We used to be a predominantly Christian country, and our leadership at least paid lip service to our values, but it's not that way anymore. Masonic values, sodomy, abortion, all this stuff, this is the mainstream culture now, and we are dissidents because we believe in the Catholic faith. And we have... Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is, American Christians and American Catholics are still operating under the false assumption that they have institutional power as Christians, and they don't. They don't.
They make you feel empowered, those Masons, until they rip it right under you.
Yeah.
Just when we wanted to get rid of a dictator, and we thought we were going to have a republic where Christianity was going to be accepted, they legislated everything to denigrate and destroy the church. And then they didn't enforce it, so we felt safe. 10 years later, they enforced it to a point we needed to have civil war. So, yes, comfort, I think, is one of our greatest sins these days.
Yeah.
Feeling comfortable, feeling safe. I don't want to drive anybody to paranoia, but the thing is that times are dire. Especially trying to live a life of virtue is very hard.
Yes.
Media, the advertisement, music, movies, everything is geared towards your most basic and carnal desires. To make you fall, to make you not take heed of the faith. And it's certainly what I think young people struggle with most. Men. I think sense of impurity are what are dragging our heels, and they make us cold, essentially. Sense of impurity that make us cold.
Yeah.
So that's one of our major battles. And we've let this run so rampant that now we see abortion as like something that's healthier, because our basic desires are so present that we think abortion as a right or something that would limit how should I say? It would limit suffering in a way. We think that it would limit suffering, and it's farthest from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, it creates a massive amount of suffering. One, because it turns the mother into a murderer, obviously not like as a vicious like axe murderer or something, but if you are complicit in the killing of your unborn child, then that's the grave sin of murder, and that causes massive. Go ahead. I was just going to say that causes. Oh, that causes massive amounts of spiritual suffering for the mother. And then you're causing suffering to society because that sort of sin ripples out to your community and hurts the people who are connected to you and your family. And maybe that was their sibling or their nephew that you just killed. The abortion doctor, the nurses who are involved, and the baby itself. They're all suffering, right? It doesn't mitigate suffering at all.
So misguided for so many years that we're proclaiming or vouching killing the most innocent in our nation.
Yes. So all that to say is you need to get real about our situation. And Andres, we'll go ahead and wrap up here in the next few minutes. Just stay on the line after I end the stream so we can chat a little bit. But yeah, all that to say is that our message to you tonight, and I think Andres will agree with me, if you're a Catholic and you actually love the faith and believe what it teaches, you need to get real about our situation, because if you're going to hold fast to the teachings of the faith, you're going to be persecuted. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get arrested and executed or something, but you're going to suffer some kind of persecution, probably social persecution. Maybe you'll be passed over for a job. Who knows? You're going to suffer some kind of persecution because Christianity no longer has institutional power in your country. It's not the cultural norm. It's a dissident movement now. And so be realistic about it.
Let us bear our crosses with a smile as well.
That's right. Yeah.
God save us from, what was it? God save us from sour-faced nuts.
Good deal, man. Well, let's see. I guess we'll wrap it up here. Andres, thanks for coming on, and we'll have you again back again next week. So, do you have any parting words before I give the sign off?
Pray the rosary, pray it gladly, and if you can, pray it from the Assumption to the Battle of Lepanto. A lot of Catholics will be joining on that kind of youth movement, and let's hope we gain merit.
That's right. Okay, so you can go to our website, menwithchests.site, and subscribe to the podcast there. We have an RSS feed up, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, all the major podcast programs. The major place that people interact with us is on Facebook, the Facebook page. We're also on Twitter. We're on DLive. We're on Twitch. We're on all the major social media. I don't think we have an Instagram, but I actually found out yesterday we have a Snapchat. I don't ever use it though. So we have everything. But yeah, Facebook is the place to interact with us mostly. And next week we're actually going to have Andy Nowicki on to talk about some of the strange proclivities of our elites. Let's just say it has something to do with famous Italian dish that's very cheesy. I don't want to say it because I don't want to get banned by YouTube, but I think you know what I'm talking about. But he literally wrote the book on the topic, and he's going to have a lot to say about the Jeffrey Epstein suicide as well. So tune in for that. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Have a good evening.